Da-da-da.
We're back.
Welcome to Everyone Belongs. The question is, if we just slack off for so long, do we call it a new season? And then we act like we did it on purpose?
Yeah.
Or do we just apologize? Leave your comment below with what you think we should do. But I'm excited for today's show.
Yeah.
My name is Ben.
I'm Cami.
And we started this podcast because we wanted to share our story as we started to expand our beliefs and ideas into a place that's big enough for everyone. Yeah. So welcome. So the story very succinctly is I was doing research for a book that I'm writing, and I was looking at these quotes by this person named Amanda Palmer, who I've kind of had a crush on for quite a while now. There's kids in the house.
Yeah, I'll deal with that.
All right, I'll tell about my crush story on Amanda Palmer.
Yeah, let me leave the room.
Otherwise, it'd be too awkward. And, well, I don't know how much of it matters, but Amanda Palmer is an author and a musician who has written a book, and I came across, the book is called The Art of Asking, and she's married to Neil Gaiman, so she's somewhat famous and a very prolific producer. And she wrote this book all about asking for help, and she has this amazing TED Talk. So I'll put the links to that stuff in the show notes if I remember, or you can remind me at the comments section on YouTube. But basically, I'm not going to give you too much backstory except for she spent this amazing time in her life as a street artist. You know those people that stand as statues and then put a plate out and ask for money? Yeah. And then they totally operate off of donations. Mm-hmm. So she has a very interesting, you can imagine.
Has seen a lot.
You get a lot of rejection.
Oh, yeah.
But you also see a side of humanity that many people do not have access to. So anyways, that's the context. This is the quote I would like to read to you. And then we're going to talk about what we can do about this.
Yeah.
Would you like to read this?
Yes.
Just to there.
There's a difference between wanting to be looked at and wanting to be seen. When you are looked at, your eyes can be closed. You suck energy, you steal the spotlight. When you are seen, your eyes must be open. And you are seen and recognizing your witness. You accept energy and you generate energy. You create light. One is exhibitionism, the other is connection. Not everybody wants to be looked at. Everybody wants to be seen. Amanda Palmer, The Art of Asking.
All right. So I've loosely organized today into just telling our story. And then I want to offer you 3 things that I think you could do, you could benefit from, that we've benefited from. Mm-hmm. So to start off with our story, most of you guys know we grew up in a fairly devout Christian world. Mm-hmm. Both of us.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it super fundamentalist, nor would I call it strict, but I do think you and I took it and ran with it and saw it as our entire life, mm-hmm. which was applauded in those circles.
Yeah.
And this quote really stands out because in that world, this Christian world, which consumed our entire ecosystem, mm-hmm. and it's so hard for me because I've been hearing from more and more people from, who was the last person I heard from? I think from Australia or Canada. Yeah, the last person I heard from was from Canada, mm-hmm. who said, when you guys describe your Christian world, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like,
God bless you.
I'm like, really? This was, I thought everyone grew up this way.
Right, yeah.
But
the world is much bigger, apparently.
This was really, occupied twice a week for our growing up. And then during the summer months, like summer camp would occupy weeks and months at a time. And then when we went to Bible college, it was really our life.
But it becomes a whole way of thinking and interpreting the world.
And it's our social circle.
Yeah.
Which means that literally every person we know and associate with is thinking the same way.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so I think I've made the point that this is our world. But in this world, one of the worst things that you can do is draw attention to yourself or your idea or ask to be seen. Because what's taught is that is selfish, and the reason why we're here is for the glory of God. And the glory, like, basically,
there's only so much glory, apparently, because if you take glory for yourself, you're stealing glory from God.
Well, it is seen as fairly competitive.
Yeah.
Like, in the bad way. Like, if I'm drawing attention to me, I'm distracting people from God. Mm-hmm. And God, in the Old Testament, kicks people's asses who don't acknowledge him and take attention away from him.
You're right.
And that's the worst fear.
Yeah.
What are you laughing at?
Oh, but that's actually a thing to believe in, that type of God. Kicks people's asses.
You don't believe that anymore.
No.
But we believed it for so long.
Oh, yeah. I don't. It's just so obvious to me now, but for most of my life, I actually believed that narrative about that type of God.
Which was really hard, because if you wanted to be a rock star, that's like probably the ultimate bad example.
Oh, like a famous.
If you want to be famous.
Famous, yeah.
And be on a stage in front of people would say that's a worldly pursuit. That's wrong. That's less than. That's unchristian. Mm-hmm. That is really anti-God, because you're distracting people from God.
Unless you're writing Christian music and performing Christian music.
But okay, so then let's go down that route, because let's say you are the Newsboys or Petra or Striper. Man, it'd be so sweet to have those sound bites right now.
Yeah.
Shine, make them wonder what you
got. Make them wish that they were not on the outside looking in. I guess. On, in.
Looking. I don't know.
Whatever.
Okay, so what that led to is these fairly ridiculous circumstances where you'd have the Newsboys up on a stage and everyone would be like cheering their brains out, just like any other rock concert. But instead of being like, we love you guys, thank you, you guys rock, fuck the government, or whatever normal rock stars say, these guys would say, it's not us, give the glory to the Lord. And they'd point to the sky and everyone would cheer louder.
Right.
That was the scene.
Yeah.
That was the code. That was the workaround. Mm-hmm. So they're still on the stage. They still feel awesome. Mm-hmm. Everyone is still having the time of their life, but they're not supposedly cheering for the Newsboys.
They have to give a nod to Heavenly Father.
They're cheering for... Which is really weird when you think about it, because in order to say that, and I've said plenty of things in my lifetime, the Newsboys and myself, you'd kind of have to say, it's not me, it's God. In other words, everything you see about me, I kind of suck.
Yeah.
I'm not really anything special.
It's very degrading
God is special.
To you. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, it's not pitched as being degrading.
No. If anything, it's supposed to be like, oh no, you're actually a better person if you do these things, if you don't steal the limelight from God.
Now, a rock star is a very extreme example, but I think this comes up in all sorts of ways. It came up with me with a lot of my ideas and my writings and my passions early on. I had these ideas, and it's really hard to explain, but I know it's real because I've heard of other authors say this, where you have this thing inside of you and it's like screaming to be let out, like it needs to be born. And you need to write it down and share it with people, whether it's on Facebook or a blog or an essay or a book or spray painted on a wall. It almost doesn't matter. It just needs to come out.
Not just exist inside of you, exist outside of you.
Yes. And I felt this for large portions of my life about a lot of different things. And sometimes I would share some of these things or want to, or sometimes I would just know better and not. Because I knew that if I did, I would be told, you are drawing attention to yourself and away from God. And being a Christian means not drawing attention to yourself. And because these ideas were intrinsically controversial,
They're attention getting then.
they're by nature, if you share them, you will get attention, even if it's not your goal.
Right.
I couldn't share them. I mean, one simple example is...
So then there's more incentive to just go with the Christian flow then, to not buck the system, because if you buck the system, you're going to draw more attention to yourself, and then that's bad. It's like a double whammy.
Yeah, and there's this like catch-22, because if I share the idea and then every other breath I say, it's not my idea, it's God's idea, I think other Christians should then wonder, well, how come they're not having the same ideas if it's the same God? Like, no matter which way you cut it, there's something unique about
Then they'd say different people have
me.
different spiritual gifts. That's like the way they would go around it.
That's true. So I spent a good portion of my life not being able to share these things, which to some people, I think a lot of people, and a lot of my life, I just got used to that because I was like, well,
because it was more important to fit in.
Yeah. And it's like, well, what's the big deal? You can kind of just suppress the idea. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that costly. I've come to believe now that it's very costly to keep who you really are and what's really on your heart, to go against it. It's like no different from when you look at cruelty to animals and you look at chickens that have their fucking beaks chopped off and are shoved in these pens. And they are like Joel Salatin, he says, you're denying the chickenness of a chicken. And you take the pigs and you chop their tails off and shove them in these tiny warehouses. You're denying the pigness of a pig. You're denying the benness of a ben or the caminess of a cami when you are not allowed to express what feels like it's inside of you or what you're made of. And it will kill you, I think. Yeah. I think it literally could kill you.
Yeah.
I think people commit suicide over this, and they go crazy because they have this thing inside of them, but they don't want to acknowledge it, because if they acknowledge it, it'll get them ostracized from their culture. So they have to deny it. But that type of self-denial.
And there's all these things going against being who you really are and letting that out. I was just listening to this other talk, and she said that Christians will use this verse, the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, to discount anything that you think on your own, who you are on your own. And you say, and if it doesn't benefit the power structure of whatever the Christian world that you may be in, then that can be used against you. I mean, there's so many things that is used to silence the special ones, silence the like voices that are different.
It's really a code,
Yeah.
There's this whole list of rules that's constantly changing and evolving.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it's biblical if we want to get into it, but I don't really want to. I'm just talking
It's just
about
like a
Christian
religious
culture.
power structure system.
So for reasons we've already talked about, we went into therapy. And
For a couple years.
very expensive, very, very good
Worth
investment
it.
for us.
Yeah.
And there's a few stories that stand out to me in therapy. One was I was recounting a phone call. In fact, this person will come up later because their name is John, and they've been featured in this podcast
Frequently.
And I was talking to my therapist about what they said, because John, after we had been out of the Christian community for a while, he calls me up kind of out of the blue, it felt like, and was expressing concern and said, it seems to me like you just want to get attention. And to me, like I said, going back to our previous world, that was the worst thing that I could ever do. That's like suicide. I mean, it's hard to explain how it's seen, but it's like spiritual suicide. Because you're killing yourself spiritually is how we saw it back then. If our job is to bring glory to God, if we're not doing that, I don't know whether I just thought in eternity I would die or whether on this earth I would also be less satisfied. So this John, kind of, I'll call him an ex-friend. I think I might have burned that bridge when I released an entire podcast about him. And RIP. He said, I think you're just trying to get attention. So I go to my therapist with Cami and I say, I had this conversation and John says that I'm just trying to get attention, that I haven't really changed and that I haven't grown and healed.
Which, if I heard that now, I think a lot of people who are listening to this, I'm sure, who don't come from that type of world where that's a bad thing, would just be like, so what? Who cares? Like, they don't see it as a bad thing. But I think you and I still had the lens of, is that, should I be doing this? Or I guess you can tell me. I think that was 2 years ago or a year ago, and I think I still had that. And I feel like every year that goes by, have less and less, like I'm able to see through it, see what it really is.
Yeah, something didn't feel right to me because, and what the only thing John had really seen is what I posted on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And he didn't even watch that stuff. He just knew that I was posting on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And once again, this goes to show how crazy that world is. Like, if you post a YouTube channel, with a goal of getting subscribers and sharing a message, you have to say it's all for God's glory. And then the Christian community kind of they don't scrutinize it too hard. They kind of will just nod and smile and be like, good job. Mm-hmm. Now, we weren't saying this anymore. And I don't even know if
even back when we were still in it.
Yeah, I don't know when we believed it. Anyways, going back to the story with our therapist looked at us and goes, so?
Yeah.
What if you are? And I was like, oh. I mean, I was like, oh. I mean, I'm allowed to get attention for myself. And that's where this Amanda Palmer thing is interesting, because I don't think John was making the distinction between being seen and being looked at, which Amanda Palmer is making a huge distinction of here, because she's saying being looked at is just trying to get attention, but being seen, she says, is really different.
It's like a deeper thing going on.
She says, when you are seen, your eyes must be open and you are seeing and recognizing your witness. You accept energy. So being seen, you're receiving something from people, and you generate energy. You craft light. You create light. One is exhibitionism. So that one is just the being looked at. You're just kind of showing off and saying, pay attention to me. The other is connection. And then she ends off by saying, everybody wants to be seen. And I would actually rephrase that to make it more strong and say, everyone needs to be seen. Mm-hmm. That's actually a human need.
At least by one or two other people. I've heard that say, it's not like you need to be seen by masses amounts of people, but you need to have connection with at least a couple people throughout your life, or it's detrimental.
I mean, another way of phrasing this is everybody needs to be acknowledged. Everyone needs to be validated.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what happens to those babies in China or Russia or wherever at these orphanages
Romania.
that don't get touched for the first year. They're not acknowledged. They go fucking nuts. They go crazy because
they actually literally die from that.
Yeah, they're not.
They can be fed food and water, but if they're never picked up or touched, you can die from that.
So if you take that physiological reality, I don't think that magically ends at the age of 2. I think it expands and it gets more complicated to say, as humans, We
That's
are
just-
relational beings.
That's just when you're the most vulnerable, is when you're
Yes, it's the
young.
most visible. But we're dependent upon feedback from others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I mean,
it shows
makes,
how connected we are.
it makes it so that we can engage in relationships where I'm not going to just like write an opera and a song on an island for myself. I'm going to want to share that with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then when people say, I heard that made me feel blank.
Yeah.
Then I can feel good, but not because I'm sucking something out of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm creating light, and that light is being acknowledged.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been writing songs for almost a year now, and it's important for me to share them, and I choose to share them on Instagram right now. And it's even important to get those likes, or just knowing that someone else witnessed the song that I wrote and they enjoyed it is actually a big part of that keeps me going. Like, oh, I'm going to keep doing this because someone else, not just me, which is important too, but not just me, enjoys this and wants this in the world.
Now, one thing that's confusing for me is that I do a lot of art for myself, and I think you do too. You write the song for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what we've learned is you don't create the art for just yourself.
Yeah. Or you don't create art just for other people. I think, I think when either one is true, something kind of dies or gets muddled, or I don't think it's actually super sustainable. Maybe you won't do it, I don't know, long term, if it's just for you or if it's just for other people.
The irony is you have all these Christians that are saying that they're doing it for the glory of God, and the art sucks balls. You know what I mean? I mean, they're saying like, I do it for God, I don't do it for man. And it's like, okay, well, maybe you should fucking pay attention and do it for some men. Because,
or maybe you should do it for yourself too, so that this doesn't suck so bad, and that you don't hate your life because of the art you're making sucks.
Well, they hate themselves because we were taught that we were bad, and that our motive was bad, our worldview was bad, our perspective was bad, and we needed God's worldview, God's perspective, and God's redemption to make anything somewhat palatable on this planet. Okay, so we went to therapy, and then we started to change.
Yeah.
And we started to see things differently, quietly at first. And I want to share the single largest thing that I think we did in the last 5 years to get healing that I've noticed, besides therapy. And that is, we decided to share our story in painful detail, painful to us, on this podcast.
Yeah.
We did that starting, was that a year ago or was it 2 years ago? I don't know.
I think it actually might have just been like 6 months ago or something like that. Because I was just looking at those podcasts, and I think it was 6 months ago we started.
And I have noticed an incredible change. The biggest change in our life in terms of the last 5 years happened post us starting to be honest and sharing our story. Mm-hmm. And I want to get into that a little bit and explain why I think that is. Because, I mean, if you want to look at phases, there was these things in our life that growing up in the church, and the more I got into working in churches, the more I realized you have to get really good at covering these things up. Hmm. This is why things like the Catholic Church scandals, like, just absolutely, they're not a coincidence. They're not surprising. It's like systematic, because people are trained in churches. If you want to fit in, especially if you want to be a leader, you have to hide certain things, to a point where I was going crazy in the church and at Bible college because I didn't even know I was hiding them, because I was told it's not called that. No one's ever instructed like hide this. Mm-hmm. But there's
you
like
instinctively just know what you shouldn't say to other people.
yeah, there's like what's taught, and then there's what's taught in reading between the lines.
It's because no one talks about it. Like, then you just know, oh, that
Totally.
is not okay to talk about.
So I thought I was crazy. I thought I was the only person experiencing these things. So I learned to hide these things, and eventually it started to just kill me. So it started to come out in funny ways. I had to share these parts of myself. And that was probably a 10-year process. And I think it was really that realization why we got kicked out of the church, because it was no longer worth it for us to repeat blindly the things that we were being told to do with our words and our lives. And they weren't okay with the reality of what we really had. Now, once we left the church, by getting kind of kicked out and kind of our choice, then it became much more explicit. These beliefs that we had, which carried on to how we now saw the church and the things that we witnessed and the way we were treated. I mean, I thought my beliefs were discounted before. This is when the real fire got turned up. Because, I mean, I started to hear explanation after explanation, never to my face, but about explaining away. And I think this is done to a lot of post-faith people. Anyone that leaves, it's never packaged as progress or evolution by people still inside of it. It's always presented as digression, falling away,
Mistake,
unbelief.
loss. Yeah. Something's wrong with them, not something's wrong with this system.
And once again, we've had to put a lot together to gather this, because no one will say, you are a loser, we feel sorry for you. People know better than that. So they say it in other ways, like, we'll pray for you, which is this like pity given towards people that are lost, you know? And we were seeing that we were now seen as worse than lost, because lost people still have hope, you know? That's why Christians spend an incredible amount of energy into converting and inviting and people, but very little energy has been put towards us, because it's like,
well, you had everything and then you just threw it all away. So you're fucked.
But so the world discounted us, and we made it, once again, we made an entire podcast of John's 2-star review of our podcast and why I thought it was so interesting.
Which he was just, we could pick on him because he was the only one that either was stupid enough or had the balls enough, not really sure which, to say to our face what he was thinking, and probably what a lot of those people are thinking, which made him a really good case study, because
the poor guy was just being honest.
I know. And so we picked on him, but I guarantee he's the voice of many.
Which my goal at all was not to make it personal or pick on him. I strongly believe he represented an entire perspective and was just not strategical enough to shut the fuck up. So he wrote about it publicly, which turned it into a fun conversation.
Yeah.
But if you want to go back and listen to that podcast, you'll hear how thinly veiled the invalidation and the discounting and silencing are. When
I was in that world and seeing people that would fall away, like, you're not taught how to like really deal with those people, because you just distance yourself. So I kind of get the feeling, and I've even had this experience where I bump into someone who was in my former life who's, you know, in that religious system, and they're kind of just like, you know, they don't really have like the ability to really engage. So that's why it's all done like behind our backs.
Like, because we hear about how our like younger relatives, like nephews and nieces, how they see us.
Or how they see their own cousins.
And it's so funny, like the lines that they're given. Like,
they're dangerous.
Well, it's like we're stupid, you know? I mean, not only are we dangerous, but yeah, it's like, it's like these one-liners that are, it's like how people saw black people or any stereotype, you know, where you're just like, oh, that's a monkey. And then that prevents you from using your mind to engage and consider
Right.
That they're really smart. They're smarter than most other white people I know. Like you never can get to that point.
Get to that point
when you have these labels.
Yeah.
Okay. But we shared our story. And before, we were so entrenched in these people that thought we were crazy that I think I mostly thought I was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And this is what I want to share, is sharing our podcast. It's really how we ended up starting this podcast, I guess, having the energy to, at least. It was like 9 episodes in painful detail. And I've heard from a lot of people that it benefited them. But once again, like I said, when we create art, it benefited us too. Since then, it made my story feel valid, true, worthwhile. It made me not feel crazy. And that's not because of what people have said. Some of it is what people have said and left comments and stuff. But for me, a lot of it was just like speaking it out into the world.
Yeah.
And just expressing it. I think, and that's where I want to get back to this quote. It says, everybody wants to be seen. And I'll take it a step further and say, not only does everybody want to be seen, but everyone has unique parts of themselves. And those unique parts and those unique stories also need to be seen. That was one of the things that was so infuriating to me about us leaving the church. I was fine with that. I was fine with people saying, hey, listen, we have this way of doing things. You guys do it differently. You don't fit in. It's too enough. Harmful for us or difficult for us to deal with you. So let's remove you. That's like a common thing that happens. That's fine with me.
That happens in every system. Yeah.
But that's not what was said. What was said was this other story. There was these details that were emphasized and this whole narrative that's completely left out. And that's what I'm not okay with, because that narrative was our narrative. So all we attempted to do with this podcast was just say, hey, their story is true, but this story is also true. These things happened.
Yeah.
Which was why it was so important to me that without judgment, we were just allowed to share the details, like who said what, the timeline, read some emails, just like facts.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying like, you're an asshole. Like that doesn't need to be the story. The story can just be, they read this to us on this date. And you decide. But let's not ignore that fact.
Yeah. Right.
So without even realizing it, I think before that, our story was so silenced by other people, and we were agreeing to that. We silenced ourselves because we were exposed to this for so long that after I recorded that podcast, I just noticed I started to see my own story differently. I mean, since then, I've almost finished writing 2 books. I just find myself like more bold when it comes to social media and just like sharing my ideas.
Well, what I came to believe is everyone is entitled to share their side of their experience. But in this world, Christian world, or even just in the world at large, it's the powerful and the masses that are the mob mentality that are allowed to share their version of the story. And so you don't get the whole picture of things because the weak and the vulnerable are silenced. And I think everyone has the right, if you want to say God-given right or human right, to like one person's side and story is not better than another's.
Yeah, and I don't think this is really a religious issue.
I don't either.
I think it was exacerbated in our religious communities.
Yeah.
But this is like every culture will have its like populace majority that will be more valued.
For our culture, it's like government, media, those are the loud voices.
Yeah. So I was still kind of saying how different our life has been, you know, and I found confidence in my voice. Not just, I mean, so we shared our story, but what's been amazing to me is how much confidence I've seen develop in other areas just of my personhood. And I've just become more expressive in general.
Yeah.
And more confident. Not like I'm right and anyone's wrong, but just like what I have is valuable and worth sharing. Because if you're not going to share it, why be alive? I mean, if you know, you can't spend your entire life hiding.
Yeah. Well, there's this whole other thing where I'm thinking about my personal life, and I started writing songs a year ago, right after I walked away from some family relationships. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And for you and I both, we started to live more into who we were once we walked away from this church system that wants to just push you down, squelch you. I mean, that's not a coincidence. Like, so it's interesting to see how there's certain relationships that can be in your life that actually can be silencing you.
Oh my gosh. I need to interrupt.
Yeah,
because
go for it. I'm done.
Cami undersold herself drastically. Cami started writing songs a year ago, but Cami like started writing amazing songs a year ago. I mean, like, for me, being married to you for close to 20 years now, I'd never heard, I mean, the first song I heard you write, I started crying. I mean, I've cried for numerous of your songs. And it's not just because I'm like some amazing appreciator of art. It's because I'd never seen you express yourself honestly, maybe ever.
Yeah, right.
And now these things are coming out of you that are so expressive and dark and true and hopeful. And I'm like, holy shit, this was in there? And hell no, it's not a coincidence, you know, that
Yeah.
1 year ago you start sharing about the most dark and painful and real things in your adult life through the only medium you know how right now, which is musically. So if you want to check out some of these songs, Cami's recording them, but you can also find she puts her Instagram is predominantly musical.
Yeah.
Which is what?
Cami Crawford, I think. Instagram.
Creative. At Cami Crawford.
I think. I'm like,
We'll put a link below.
pretty sure.
But anyways, and one other final anecdotal story, and then we need to move the hell on, I think, is I'm writing a story about our family hiking the Appalachian Trail. I'm currently on, I'm just calling it the 10th draft. And it took this final draft before I was willing to write aspects of our hike that pertain to our spiritual community and why the hike was so valuable to spend 6 months walking in the woods, distraction free, just to process the pain of losing everyone and everything that was valuable to us. But it took me the 10th draft to get to that point.
Yeah.
And
wow.
that's even with all of this courage and sharing our story. But I don't think I would have done it at all had we not done the podcast. Because I was told, for numerous reasons, you know, when you're told that your job is to bring glory to God, and then you're taught that our God is a God of peace, which is like really crazy when you read the Old Testament and what he did to the fucking Canaanites.
It's like, that's convenient.
Or whatever. Then all of a sudden, God being God of peace means you not sharing any shit on any human on the planet other than yourself, which means your story doesn't even belong to you anymore, actually. And your job is to make everyone else look good. So then you just can't, you just ignore those things and you don't include those in your story and you make everyone else look good, or you just don't talk about it. But that makes for shitty stories.
Can I just say how damaging it is to say that this is for the glory of God when it's shit? Like, if a pastor has like a sermon and they're just like, I just pray that God, that you would you speak through me. And then everyone's like, oh, God spoke through him. And then that's just,
God
that's
sucks at
so
speaking.
abusive. Oh, I hate it. I think it's fucking ridiculous. Anyways.
Okay, so everybody needs to be seen. So this is my challenge and my invitation, my altar call for you all. Close your eyes. Don't look around you. Just kidding. No, but really, I believe this, and I believe that you out there listening need to be seen. Every part of you. Not by everyone,
Right.
but by someone.
And of your choosing, too.
Yep, absolutely. You get to choose. So I just have 3 points for you to consider, takeaways for you as you move forward. One, just first of all, acknowledge that you are healthiest when you are seen, when you're validated, when you are noticed. I didn't mention, I've mentioned in numerous of our podcasts, I was pretty influenced by this guy named Dale Carnegie, who wrote this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, which sounds cheesy as hell, but has been a bestseller for years and years and years on relationships. And he says in there that if people cannot find significance in this world, they will create their own. And he says that's actually a basis for a lot of mental health, which I fully agree with. And if your giftings, your talents, your stories, your life is not seen as significant by yourself or the people around you, you will start to create alternate realities. And I think that's damaging. So I just want people to start by acknowledging that, especially for the religious folks out there, the Christians or whatever religious beliefs you've been taught, that, I think we're especially harsh on kids, where we in the Christian world, we taught that not only are you a sinner and God deserves the glory, but little people, smaller people, and younger people, their voices are the least valuable because they're, in addition to being young and sinners, they're foolish. They haven't attained wisdom that comes with age, along with a bunch of other things that come with age, like stubbornness and being an asshole. We conveniently ignore those. Okay, so the second thing is, and this is really, I would say this is the most important one. This is the entire reason why I record this podcast. Start telling your story, especially the dark parts or the unpopular parts. Start telling it somewhere, somehow, with someone.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who, but the stuff that you
even if it's to yourself, I would say
absolutely.
Like you could journal or you could make art or whatever it is that, and if you're not ready to share it to someone else, I still think it's really incredibly valuable to share it with yourself that way.
I'm so glad you said that, because this does not need to be a New York Times bestseller. It's not like a thing where numbers make it more powerful. It's just whatever you need to do to validate the truth.
Your own truth. Yes.
So, yes, right. And I think the reason why I was excited to record this in this time is during this pandemic quarantine virus scenario, I think this is a great time to undertake challenges like this and to figure out a way to creatively and effectively share a part of your story that you've never considered sharing because no one said it was important. I mean, this also is true, and I know this can be triggering for some people, but this is also and especially true of like sexual abuse cases where this thing happens to you, and quite often the abuser, their number one tool is to basically look you in the eye and say, it didn't happen, or to say you wanted it.
Or discount it or dismiss it somehow.
They overwhelm your story with their own, and in turn, they invalidate you. And it's so important to say, no, I didn't want it. This happened. This hurt me. And to share that with a spouse, a friend, a journal, to write a song, to create a blog, to create a vlog and video it, to create a podcast. I don't care what it is. I think you might find, if your story is anything like ours, that there can be like actual turning points that start to happen as you begin to share. And the final thing is surround yourself with people who value your story. And
get rid of those who don't.
absolutely. Yeah. But you might notice the more you share your story, the more that happens naturally.
Right.
People
Especially if you stand up for yourself.
and that's what happened to us. I think we would have hung on to those people for dear life, but they let go of
They're
us.
like, peace out.
And we fought it, and then now we're thankful. But what I've also noticed is as we've started to share our story, and this, oh man, I think this is going to be the next episode, but this really pisses me off because it's easy for people to look at us and to say, oh, you did it because it's the popular thing, and you knew there was going to be all these people that would come up and support you, you know?
What?
Bullshit. When you share your story and it's about something that you've never shared before and something that you've been taught is like destructive or whatever, common sense or logic doesn't matter. I thought we were digging our own grave.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know there was anyone else out there. I mean, I knew, but I didn't feel that.
Yeah. Or you don't know if those people if you'd ever find more people or, yeah.
But what's happened is as we've shared, more and more people have come out, and it's very surprising and shocking, but in a wonderful way, even though now in hindsight, it shouldn't be surprising.
Well, you're in your own little shell or your own bubble of reality. And then you step out of that and then you realize, oh, there's a whole nother reality. There's other realities out here, not just this one.
Yeah. And that's been so healing for us, is to hear,
Yeah.
you know, I love this Amanda Palmer quote and I want to read it again. We're going to end the podcast by reading it one last time and see how it strikes you now.
There's a difference between wanting to be looked at and wanting to be seen. When you are looked at, your eyes can be closed. You suck energy. You steal the spotlight. When you are seen, your eyes must be open, and you are seen and recognizing your witness. You accept energy and you generate energy. You create light. One is exhibitionism, the other is connection. Not everybody wants to be looked at. Everybody wants to be seen. One thing I want to say is I actually don't think it's bad to want to be looked at. And I don't think it's bad to be an exhibitionist. But I kind of think the point she's making is that there is a difference, first of all, between that and wanting to be seen. But I think sometimes people throw them together and they say, oh, if you want to be seen, then you just want attention, kind of what you said at the beginning. When I actually think those are two very different things. But of course, wanting attention I don't think it's bad. But it is, I think, important to see the difference between the two.
So what I would love for you guys listening out there, one is to know that it has been very valuable for us to be seen. And I would love for this to be a podcast and a community and a place where we can encourage other people to find the courage to be seen in areas that maybe they never thought were possible. And I would like to take it one step further, where I would like to create a challenge to you to share
Invitation.
an altar call to the glory of God. I would love to create an invitation for you to share one thing, one area, one story that you want to tell, one thing that you want to write to the world or yourself in the next week, and to leave a note either in a comment on the YouTube channel. We have Everyone Belongs Facebook group that you can join and discuss this topic. I will be posting this quote there along with this question. And you can be specific or you can be vague, but be as specific as you need to be in your actual sharing or writing. I don't care what you share with us or the group, but when you do it, the more specific you are, the more specific your validation might be. Mm-hmm. Thank you for listening. This podcast is available on iTunes and Spotify and Google Play and all the major places you can find podcasts. It's also available on video form on our YouTube channel. Those links and all those links, other links that I mentioned, will be found in the description.
You said for them to leave a comment on the Everyone Belongs Facebook page. Is that what you said?
Wherever they want, but yeah.
Or here? Okay.
Thank you guys for listening. I hope you share your stories. And thank you to all the patrons that support us. This is the only way that this podcast is supported at this time. We will see you guys next time.
Peace.